Let's talk about that first deal that you got into. Was it passive? Was it active? What was the process? And talk about that first one, because it is a little bit jarring, nerve-wracking, whatever the term you want to use, when you got to wire that first 20, 50, 100 grand to a syndicator.
Yeah, absolutely. I find the person who I heard speaking about multifamily syndications first had a mentorship program. So it took about a year and a half after I first heard him before I could go to his intro event where it was his intake to his program. But I did eventually get there as I was getting ready to retire, and I immediately signed up right there. Didn't do any research comparing one coach to a different coach or anything like that. I was like, nope, I'm sold. I'm doing this right now. So I got into that, and there was a series of classes, online course modules to go through to understand how to acquire an apartment building and how the underwriting works and all those different facets of it. But I wanted to also get my money to work right away because I was in the middle of retiring off active duty. There's a lot involved with that I won't get into all the details of. But it's a lot. It's kind of difficult to get out of the military, believe it or not.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and then I was getting a first civilian job I'd had in almost 20 years, and I was moving back to the California coast from being out in the desert for my last duty station. So I knew it might take a little bit of time for me to get those course modules done. So I wanted to put some of my money to work immediately. So I invested in one of the first syndications that came across my computer screen there, that the head of that mentoring program was actually on the general partnership team for. So I just took a leap of faith and trusted that this is going to produce results for me, and invested about $30,000 in that deal, and watched how it performed, and looked at the financials and asked a bunch of questions while I kept on going through those course modules and learning more. So,
and at what point was this? Like, what time frame are we looking at? Because when did you retire, and when was this first kind of transition to multifamily?
Yeah, this is in the spring and summer of 2015. So this is, in hindsight, it's the golden age of multifamily. I just didn't quite know it at the time.
Yeah, it was definitely on the run up. If you bought something then and you held it for even 2, 3, 4 years, you probably made a decent chunk of change. And I think that's interesting because a lot of people, when they invest passively, they think that they have to be really behind the curtains. And if you find the right operator or right syndicator and you want to learn more, most of them are very open to pulling back the curtain a little bit and helping to show you how the inner workings of a multifamily syndication general partnership group work, especially if you want to eventually transition to being active, and whether it's finding deals or investor relations, raising capital, whatever you want to do. So it sounds like you had an interest in learning more, and that operator syndicator was open to giving you a little bit more time than maybe they would on a normal passive investor.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Justin. And that's what I always try to do with my investors too. The majority of my investors aren't trying to sponsor or invest actively, but there are some that do have that interest. And so I welcome them to listen. We can dedicate some time. We can have some conversations, and I can show you the inner workings of how this all works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about the focus on and helping veterans. But before we get there, I want to talk a little about your first active deal. I guess I shouldn't put that first. Have you been on the active side? Have you shifted over to active now? And also, at what point did you decide, hey, I'm going to focus on real estate full time and pull that plug?
Yeah, I have been an active GP on several deals now.
Okay.
About less than a year after I joined that program, so early 2016, that's when I was back in the San Diego area. I had a job, I was settled in, and I'd gone through all those course modules. I was like, okay, now I need to start getting my money's worth out of this program that I just bought, because it wasn't worth it just for passive investing, but definitely was for sponsoring. Okay, I need to be a general partner now. Living in San Diego was great, especially as a retired military officer and everything like that, but I'm just not going to invest in California. It's just not going to happen, because one of my main criteria is to invest in a market that is landlord and business friendly. And while there are some parts of California that might make sense from a financial or market perspective, when it comes to that, the entire state's off limits for me. Phoenix was about the closest market to me that made sense for me to focus on. I ended up partnering up with two guys who were in that same mentoring program from me. They were in Dallas. They had day jobs based in the IT industry. They had just closed their very first multifamily property in Norman, Oklahoma, which is coincidentally where I went to college. I grew up in Tulsa and went to University of Oklahoma.